She's Takamori's classmate, a boy who's hiding a deep secret. He has an intense crush on her. How could she possibly know this? Simple. Ever since she was a child, she's had the ability to hear other people's thoughts. She feels it's not a gift, but a curse, because society treats her like she's useless. However, luckily, this ability didn't cause any deep psychological trauma and instead made her stronger. She'd stopped being bothered by it until she started sitting next to Takamori. Since then, she's been able to hear his thoughts. Like when Takamori thinks Minami is cute, but Minami just secretly wishes he'd shut up. Takamori is shy, yet he's very popular with the girls because of his handsome looks, which Minami finds hard to understand since his personality is so incredibly bland. He even admitted that he only started liking a girl because she gave him a gift. Minami realizes that in her entire life, not a single boy has ever called her cute, at least not in their thoughts where she could hear them. She wonders if Takamori can control his embarrassing thoughts. While she's thinking this, her intense gaze suddenly catches Takamori's attention. But right after that, Takamori accidentally dropped his eraser. Minami saw it and picked it up for him since the eraser was near her desk. As she returned the item to Takamori, he looked straight into her eyes and thought, Minami's face is so close. She's like a goddess, so incredibly kind. I love her more than words can say. Minami suddenly turned red as a tomato, unable to say anything in the face of such straightforward words. Takamori realized he might have been staring too long and worried she'd think he was some kind of weirdo. Meanwhile, Minami didn't know what to do with her hands. She felt like she couldn't take it anymore, as this was too much for a good girl like her. She wondered how Takamori could be so direct. Thinking about expressing his feelings, Takamori told himself that since the eraser had been touched by Minami, it should be treated like a family heirloom. Meanwhile, Minami was still trying to calm her body down from what had just happened. She couldn't help but blush as she remembered Takamori calling her cute, and how handsome he looked when he confessed his feelings. She felt like the sun was shining into her heart, and at that moment, she could have died of embarrassment. This wasn't the first time she'd felt this way. She remembered her childhood. Back in kindergarten, when she fainted from embarrassment just because her teacher patted her head. She thought to herself, maybe this was her own personal problem. She'd always been weak to praise and affection her whole life, because since she was little, she was often backstabbed and secretly mocked. However, these rare instances had less of an impact on her than getting the cold shoulder. To be fair, Takamori didn't mean for his thoughts to leak out. It was Minami who accidentally read them. She felt a little guilty about this, because with her power, she could easily erase all thoughts from her mind like a monk who had trained for years. However, he was different. This was a classic case of an incel. She'd rather be insulted and hated than be praised so much, especially on websites like Reddit. She thought it was much more comfortable to deal with criticism, not admiration. She suddenly came up with a plan. If she made him hate her, maybe her school life would go back to being peaceful. That's right. If he hated her, she could easily ignore him like everyone else. But how could she do that? She couldn't just tell him she hated him for no reason. Suddenly, Takamori asked if he could borrow her study materials, since he might have forgotten his book. She replied that it would be fine if they shared. But then she immediately regretted it, thinking this was the perfect opportunity to make him hate her. She quickly changed her mind and said she wouldn't let him borrow her study materials after all, hoping her plan would succeed. If she did that, so what? He would think she was just a petty girl who wouldn't share her study materials, and he would hate her. Then she could study in peace without being bothered. But on second thought, Minami felt terrible for having to play the villain, and sitting next to Takamori only made things more awkward. She glanced over at him, worried that she might have gone too far. However, Takamori just thought she was still so cute and was surprised by her attitude. How strange. It wasn't working at all. Takamori thought it was rare to see Minami act like that, and he would cherish this moment forever. In the end, Minami had no choice but to apologize and give him her textbook. He seemed incredibly excited to see so many sides of her in such a short time. She told him to just take the book and leave her alone, telling him to stop bothering her immediately. After that, Minami rushed into the girls' restroom, trying to regain her composure after everything that had just happened. She wondered why things had turned out this way, asking herself what she did wrong to deserve this treatment. She felt indignant at the thought of him daring to praise her. Leaning her head against the wall, Minami tried to calm down and realized she had never met anyone so obsessed with her before. She was afraid that if this continued, she might actually go insane. In her mind, she told herself that he had to hate her. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to stand it any longer. With a beet red face and feeling utterly mortified, Minami knew she had no other choice. She decided she would do whatever it took to solve this problem. On the school rooftop, an unexpected challenger called Takamori out for a private talk. Although he said everything was fine, deep down, he was savoring the present moment, etching it into his mind like a vivid painting that would never fade. He wondered, why would Minami want to meet me privately on the rooftop? What could she possibly want to talk about? Minami wanted to know what he really thought of her. She considered whether the things you see in romance movies were true, force him to confess, and then brutally reject him, leaving him completely and utterly crushed. Thanks to all those dramatic movies, she was confident this plan would work. It wasn't that she hated him, but she needed to prioritize her own sanity. Even though she told herself it would be fine if he said he hated her, deep down, she wasn't sure if she'd actually be okay with that. Meanwhile, in his mind, a monologue as long as a Shakespearean play was racing by at the speed of light. His face was flushed, his thoughts a jumbled mess. He realized that he loved her, that she was precious and deserved to be protected at all costs. Not only that, but she was so cute it could make someone drop dead from sheer adorableness. Meanwhile, Minami's brain started to overload, as if its circuits were shorting out. She felt dizzy, saw stars, and finally collapsed onto the ground, completely overwhelmed by the surging wave of positive emotions. Takamori worriedly asked if Minami was okay and reached out a hand to help her up. But at this point, she was barely conscious. Inwardly, Minami thought, "Just you wait. One day, I'll shut you up for good." Outwardly, she mumbled that she was about to die, leaving Takamori completely confused about what was happening. The truth is, Minami had a special ability. She could read other people's minds. To her, it felt more like a curse because it seemed like everyone hated her. At 16 years old, Minami was used to this. Since it happened every day, she learned to ignore the voices in her head because they were just empty words. If she hadn't held on to that thought, she probably would have had what it takes to be a politician. One morning, as usual, she greeted Takamori. Inside his head, for the first time that day, the thought popped up. She's super cute today, too. Minami still couldn't get used to this. Why was the very first thing that popped into his simple brain always how cute she was? This feeling was so annoying, and she was about to die of embarrassment. If possible, she'd rather he hated her, even if he cursed her out in every way imaginable, than continue to be drowned in this endless flood of compliments. Minami felt she needed to figure out a way to make Takamori hate her, and fast. Otherwise, she was afraid she might have a stroke at this rate. After the bell signaling the end of class rang, she was exhausted from listening to his honest and persistent thoughts all day. During class, Takamori seemed to think about her non-stop, making Minami wonder how he could be so relentless without getting tired. With sweat dripping onto her desk, she felt like she just wanted to get out of the classroom immediately. However, as she was trudging away, Minami suddenly realized she'd left her bag in the classroom. She rushed back, filled with frustration and silently thinking that Takamori himself was the reason for her forgetfulness. As she walked into the classroom, she saw Takamori still sitting at his desk, which made her wonder why he was still there when class was over. Takamori explained that the teacher had assigned him the task of grading tests. Minami couldn't believe her ears, with only one thought in her mind. How could any teacher place so much trust and responsibility on a single student? Minami felt it was unfair and wanted to offer to help Takamori, but then she stopped herself mid-thought. She told herself that if she helped him, he would definitely say something so embarrassing that she'd want the ground to swallow her whole. After a few seconds of hesitation, Minami decided to let him handle it himself, even though her whole body was trembling with guilt. She quickly grabbed her bag and left, not forgetting to apologize profusely in her head. She thought that with this act, he would surely see her as one of those superficially kind people, the type who just leaves others to fend for themselves. Once outside the classroom, Minami immediately stopped in her tracks. She thought she had overcome the voices in her head, but it turned out she was just as weak as ever. She wondered why Takamori had to sit right next to her, making everything so complicated. Suddenly, she could hear Takamori's thoughts. He thought Minami was a good person, even though she had just left him all alone. Huh? What? This makes no sense. She was so used to being silently criticized by others, but this was the complete opposite. In Takamori's thoughts, he was grateful that she had spoken to someone as boring and ordinary as him. He truly cherished the fact that she cared about him, even for just a brief moment. Standing in the hallway, Minami didn't know how to react. For the first time, she didn't feel ashamed or embarrassed, but instead felt a wave of comfort and happiness wash over her. Minami tried to calm herself down, thinking that maybe Takamori was a good person too. A nagging feeling of guilt for leaving him alone gnawed at her, and she wondered if she should go back and help him grade papers, but she quickly dismissed the idea. She couldn't imagine what would happen if she ended up in the hospital because of ridiculous situations like this. In her confusion, Minami decided to run for it before she could regret her decision and turn back. But in the end, her kindness won out and she returned to the classroom. Well, at least I can try to grade the test quickly before I pass out again, she told herself. Meanwhile, Takamori was thinking very highly of Minami. He admired her for staying behind to help him. But Minami just wanted him to hurry up and focus on his work, instead of continuing to think things that embarrassed her. When Takamori's pen ran out of ink, Minami asked him if he had a spare. He handed her another pen, but the moment she took it, their hands accidentally touched. Minami immediately pulled her hand back, realizing she had just touched him without permission. However, Takamori wasn't bothered at all. On the contrary, he was thinking he would never wash his hand for the rest of his life. I knew it! This guy is absolutely hopeless! Minami screamed internally, her face flushing bright red. Meanwhile, her body temperature skyrocketed, and she felt like she was about to lose consciousness from sheer embarrassment. Unfortunately, Minami suddenly collapsed to the floor. She panicked, thinking she would literally die of embarrassment if this kept up. Everything in the classroom started spinning around her, which made Takamori worry. He saw her suddenly drop to her knees and couldn't help but feel concerned. But Minami just couldn't take it anymore. She thought, "Don't act so innocent, this is all your fault." Even so, she still couldn't understand how Takamori could keep such a straight face. She felt it was unfair that all the trouble was falling on her, while he didn't seem the least bit embarrassed. Minami continued to blame herself, thinking this was all because Takamori never openly expressed his feelings. But at the same time, she couldn't bring herself to say that she completely hated him. Finally, when the two of them were alone in the classroom, Minami decided to force Takamori to confess. She shouted his name and asked him point blank if he liked her. Minami's face was beet red, and she couldn't look Takamori in the eye, even though her voice was very loud. Takamori's eyes lit up, as if something inside him had just awakened. He started to turn away, because Takamori wasn't good at expressing his true feelings. Minami wanted him to stop gathering his things for a moment, because she couldn't take it anymore. She felt incredibly embarrassed by what she'd just said. No matter what his answer was, Minami knew she would inevitably end up in the hospital. She just wanted him to forget the whole thing and say goodbye. She hurriedly slammed the door shut, leaving Takamori behind. As for Takamori, his body began to change, as if reflecting his true feelings. He couldn't understand what had just happened, and it left him completely stunned. Even when he recalled it, the feeling in his chest was like his heart was about to explode. Minami rushed home, thinking she'd just made a life-altering move. What on earth was I thinking? She wondered. While she was bathing, the memories of today's events kept swirling in her head. Even as she was about to go to sleep, those images were still etched into Minami's mind, and she wondered if any of it had been real. She had said such ridiculous things to Takamori, and in her attempt to make him hate her, she'd accidentally done the exact opposite. She had no idea how she was going to face him at school tomorrow. There was no avoiding him since he sat right next to her. She realized she'd made a huge mistake. He was going to think she was some self-conscious, anxious mess. How embarrassing to think she'd cornered herself like this. Minami tossed and turned in bed, not knowing what to do with this sudden burst of energy. She couldn't even stop thinking about Takamori in her sleep. The next morning, she hadn't been able to sleep at all last night. Now she had no idea how to face Takamori with a straight face. Whatever happens, happens, she told herself. Minami flinched when she heard the chair next to her being pulled out. She couldn't look him in the eye, but she still managed to say, "Good morning." Takamori was just like always. Nothing had changed. Everything that happened yesterday might as well not have existed. Minami was confused, wondering if she was the only one overthinking this. He seemed completely normal, or rather, he always did. However, when she read his thoughts, she discovered he was in the exact same state as her. He hadn't been able to sleep a wink all night, and now he couldn't look her in the eye either. Why did she say those things yesterday? Takamori was really curious, but he knew he could never bring it up. It seemed Minami's suspicions were correct. He thought to himself, "Of course you're thinking about it too, you idiot." Takamori wondered what on earth she'd been trying to imply. The first major incident was on the roof, when she asked him what he thought of her. Could it be that she knew he liked her? Minami had actually known since the beginning of the semester. Was his love for her so strong that it was leaking out of his mind? No way. That made no sense at all, based on their past encounters. Everyone had a negative impression of him, so there's no way she could have concluded that he loved her. Besides, it's not like she can read minds. But hearing that, Minami was startled, afraid he might have found her out. Takamori thought there might be another reason. Was he grinning right in front of her? Oh no, now she's going to think I'm a total creep. This is really bad. Takamori didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. He just wanted to keep all his thoughts inside his head. This was precisely the reason she had behaved as she did. In the schoolyard, she was in gym class. She felt like she was just running in circles. Their relationship wasn't going anywhere. If only she could read people's minds. And if she didn't always have to deal with compliments. Her high school life could have been so peaceful. Even though she couldn't control what others thought of her, she couldn't give up on trying to make him hate her. She had to think of an effective way to make him despise her before she died of embarrassment. But then she tripped on a large rock, and, oh God, she fell flat on her face. Her entire face slammed into the concrete. This really wasn't her day. Did some ghost hate her this much? Just being able to read minds was annoying enough. Seeing this, the teacher rushed over to ask if she was okay. Luckily, she wasn't seriously injured. But the teacher then asked if someone could take Minami to the nurse's office. Minami quickly pretended she was fine and could walk on her own. The teacher was still worried and suspected she might be lying so as not to bother anyone. That was a close call. She didn't want to be a bother to anyone. She could read everyone's thoughts, and none of them wanted to help her. She was afraid that someone might suddenly start bullying her. She was used to taking care of herself. This outcome was better anyway. Even if she couldn't read minds, she could sense that people didn't like her. Minami fell to the ground again after she twisted her ankle. Maybe she should have let someone help her, but it was too late now. Her whole life, she had been used to living this way. Luckily, no one witnessed this embarrassing moment. Minami started to cry as she realized she was all alone in this world. Suddenly, a voice called out her name. It was Takamori, worried about her condition and wondering why she had started to cry. "Are you really okay?" She looked up and felt a sense of relief to discover that he was worried about her. She tried to hide her face and wondered why Takamori was here. Wasn't he supposed to be in class? Takamori had actually rushed to check on her after hearing she got hurt during class, but he figured she would definitely get mad if he did that. Takamori simply replied that he'd forgotten something in the classroom. He was worried because her injury seemed to be getting worse. Minami tried to hide her feelings and said that she was fine, that there was nothing to worry about. Actually, it's just really comfortable sitting on the ground. She wanted him to go back to class, otherwise the teachers would scold him. Suddenly, Takamori grabbed her hand, insisting he would take her to the nurse's office because he didn't think she was fine at all. Minami was stunned. Her heart felt like it was about to explode. Takamori was the type of person to act without thinking, especially in serious situations. Minami started seeing spots, feeling like she was going to pass out. She didn't want to be hurt both physically and emotionally. Takamori then knelt down, offering to carry her on his back. Wait a minute, was she seeing things? What was this situation? When it came to protecting someone he cared about, Takamori never hesitated. Her strong desire to protect things led to her being carried piggyback by a boy from her class. She could never have imagined this happening in her entire life. It's so embarrassing. Every single day, it's something new. She tried to make excuses, worried she might be too heavy for him to carry, but he just said she felt really light to him. She just wanted him to put her down right now. Because if this kept up, she was sure she'd pass out. Carrying an unconscious her on his back would be an even bigger burden. She tried to block out all the noise in her head just to stop herself from overthinking. But someone was actually impressed by her reluctance to bother anyone. Though it might be better if she just let someone help her for once, sometimes Minami was just too hard on herself. Wait a minute. This was the first time she'd ever thought of him differently. The first time she thought he was kind of cute. Takamori just wished she would learn to rely on others a little more. He would be honored if she could just trust him. If that happened, he'd be truly happy. Minami felt a strange flutter in her heart. It wasn't a bad feeling, but a warm one. Then Takamori suddenly asked if she had a fever, because her body temperature just kept getting higher and higher. At this point, Minami just wanted him to hurry up and get her to the nurse's office. Takamori told her to just stay quiet while he called for the nurse. She called out his name, thanking him for his kindness, saying he was the only one who ever looked out for her. She even said she'd repay the favor by taking care of him next time he got hurt. Takamori had no idea what she was talking about. Minami tried flexing her muscles, insisting she was much stronger than she looked. She might look skinny, but she could totally carry him princess style with no problem. She even hit a dab, hoping it would make him uncomfortable. Since no guy would want a girl this ridiculously strong, Minami was trying her best to prove she had a weird personality. However, it didn't change a thing. Takamori just thought that was cute too. She nearly exploded from his compliment. When the nurse arrived, she noted that the girl seemed to have a fever, as her body temperature was quite high for such a sweltering hot school day. Minami called out to Takamori, and she wanted to borrow his phone for a moment. Strangely, he didn't object and just handed it over, even though he had a feeling something wasn't right. Minami quickly did something on his phone while Takamori watched her, confused. After she was done, she didn't give the phone back to him. She just said goodbye and was about to leave the classroom. Takamori, confused, wondered what she had done with his phone. He couldn't figure it out, or why she'd suddenly wanted to borrow it in the first place. Wait a minute. Could this be her way of saving her number in his contacts? It was the only number in his contacts. Aside from his family's, he now had his very first friend in his contact list. He couldn't believe he deserved this. Minami giggled to herself. It seemed she didn't hate him anymore, but was she really not paying him any mind? What was she planning? When she got home, she chuckled to herself again, having finally gotten his contact information. Now she could spam him with a ton of stickers and annoy him with constant calls. That's right, who's laughing now? Takamori would definitely regret adding her to his contacts. And then he'd get so angry, he wouldn't have the energy to bother her anymore. This was the perfect plan. There was no way it could fail. He'd probably think she wanted to be his girlfriend, and just like that, her peaceful high school life would return. Minami continued to snicker at her own petty thoughts. Without another thought, she would start annoying him as much as possible. At Takamori's house, he received a message from Minami, telling him that she had just gotten home. Takamori wasn't used to getting messages from anyone besides his family. 30 minutes later, Minami wondered when he would reply. She thought he should be getting really annoyed with her by now. But an hour later, he still hadn't replied to her message. Was he even home? 2 hours went by, and she started to wonder if he'd forgotten to check his phone or was simply ignoring her. She couldn't stop wondering what he was doing. Could he be sleeping? Wait a minute, he left her on read. How dare he ignore her? Who has the nerve to do that to their one and only friend? Why would he do this to her? He sits right next to her in class, so what the heck is he doing? She thought she didn't care about him, but why leave her on read? She worried if she was bothering him too much, but wait, if that were the case, wouldn't she be achieving her original goal? If he were here, she could just read his mind. Meanwhile, on the other end, Takamori was thrilled to see her message him for the first time. He never thought a day like this would come, thank the gods above. So, how should he reply to her? Should he just act normal and say he got home too? But he started to worry that he might make her misunderstand and think he didn't like her. He thought for a long time, wondering if he should add a smiley face or some other emoji to show he just wanted to keep the conversation casual. But then he worried that if he did, he'd look like some creep who doesn't know how to start a conversation. Just then, a ping came from her phone. Takamori had finally replied. But wait, he just sent her a sticker. She was shocked when she saw the message. All those hours of waiting just for a single sticker? She felt like he was messing with her. It was as if he wanted to end the conversation immediately, even though she hadn't even texted much yet. Takamori, on the other hand, felt completely dejected. He realized he had no ability to text or convey his feelings through words. He put his phone down and began to think seriously. Why would Minami want to text someone like me? The only thing connecting them was their seating arrangement in class. Other than that, they were just ordinary classmates. No deep conversations had ever taken place between them. Takamori thought that someone as dull and boring as him couldn't possibly be interesting to talk to if only he had better communication skills. Maybe things would be different, but he still couldn't shake the habit of thinking it was impossible. Just then, his phone rang, and the screen displayed Minami's name. Why is she calling me? Is this an emergency? Or did my mom call by mistake? But then he realized it was Minami. Deep breaths. Inhale, exhale. Calm down, just act normal, he told himself. Minami, on the other hand, was thrilled when Takamori picked up. She was curious why he hadn't replied to her messages in so long, so she decided to call him directly. She couldn't understand why he would leave her on read. Takamori felt flustered, apologizing for his poor communication skills. Minami laughed lightly, saying she understood if he was busy. Takamori didn't know how to keep the conversation going, and the atmosphere immediately became awkward. When the flow of the conversation came to a sudden halt, everything fell into silence. It was just a phone call, so why was it so hard? If they were face-to-face, Minami could have easily read his thoughts. She had imagined that Takamori would be more talkative, but the reality was different. He was like a lone wolf, not one for many words. This could be quite interesting, she thought, but also difficult at times. Minami wanted to get the conversation going again. Since she was the one who had called him, she told Takamori to look out his window. He slid open the balcony door. What was out there? A rare sight of a brilliant full moon in the night sky, combined with the city lights, created a romantic atmosphere. Minami thought it was beautiful and wondered if he could see the same view from his side. Takamori was on the phone with Minami as they both gazed at the bright moon. There were so many things he wanted to say, but every time he tried to express them, he couldn't form coherent sentences, which left him feeling incredibly frustrated. He wished he could just convey the thoughts in his head. Maybe then he would be happier. Before, he used to feel worn out by the daily grind of school. But then one time, he saw Minami helping an old woman. And he couldn't look away. His eyes were completely fixed on her. And in that very moment, he experienced his first love. Trying to gather his courage, Takamori told Minami that the moon was beautiful, and those words made her heart open up to him. In Japanese culture, that phrase can also mean I love you. But as soon as she thought of that, something inside her snapped, causing her to accidentally drop her phone on the ground, panicking because she didn't know what he really meant. Minami was still reeling from what Takamori had said. She wondered if he actually meant it, and it seemed his unexpected words had made her drop her phone in shock. She tried to comfort herself that he only meant the moon was beautiful, nothing more. Then Takamori was shocked when Minami suddenly hung up. His younger sister, who had been eavesdropping on the call, asked him if Minami was his girlfriend. Takamori quickly denied it, but he couldn't help feeling embarrassed for saying the moon is beautiful, which in Japanese literature can be interpreted as, I love you. He blamed himself. He realized why she had suddenly hung up on him. He cursed himself for the way he said it, and couldn't help but blame his Japanese literature classes for the misunderstanding. He thought it would be disrespectful to say something like that to a girl without any real meaning behind it, even if it was just an accident. However, Takamori finally calmed down and admitted that he really did have feelings for her. The next morning, Minami felt full of energy as she recalled what Takamori said last night. She comforted herself, thinking, "Don't worry, Takamori has surely forgotten everything that happened." She greeted Takamori as usual, but felt incredibly hot and just kept rambling on about nothing. She kept making excuses and justifications like there was no tomorrow, just hoping those memories would disappear. She wanted Takamori to forget what happened last night. However, with a cold expression, Takamori simply gave a short reply. All right. It seemed he was as calm and cool as ever. And perhaps he didn't realize Minami had thought last night was a confession, when it was actually just a misunderstanding. But then, Takamori suddenly wanted to make it clear that he really did have feelings for her. Minami couldn't believe her ears. She was stunned to hear those words. Takamori blushed, unable to take back what he'd said. Does this mean last night really was a confession? She collapsed to the ground, her body feeling completely lifeless. It was as if every function in her body had just stopped. A new dramatic chapter was about to begin. During cooking class, the teacher asked the students to get into groups and start making curry. Minami still couldn't escape the memory of last night. She didn't understand why Takamori would want her to remember those words. Was it really a confession? But he didn't outright say, I love you, so there was no reason to keep thinking about it. Suddenly, someone caught Minami's attention. He offered to help her cut the vegetables, since it might be dangerous if she did it alone. Minami started to feel like she was self-destructing. All the eyes in the classroom turned towards her. She stumbled again, and the old utensils scattered across the floor. A worried classmate asked if she was okay. Minami quickly said she was fine, but she couldn't help but feel like everyone was watching her, especially him. She tried to cut the vegetables while closing her eyes, too embarrassed to even look. And then it happened. She accidentally cut her finger. The sharp pain made her jump. Takamori quickly came over, worriedly asking if she was hurt. She held up her hand, insisting it was nothing serious. However, Takamori was all too familiar with her habit of always hiding her pain. Without hesitation, he gently pressed a cotton ball onto her wound. Even though he was never used to taking care of someone, he knew Minami's clumsy nature all too well. At this rate, she'd get into trouble again in no time. After a moment, the bleeding stopped. Takamori reminded her to be more careful next time. His concern for her truly came from a place of worry for her safety, as he knew her clumsiness could lead to an accident at any moment. Hearing this, Minami's emotions swelled up inside her again. She took a deep breath, and now she was more energized than ever to cook the curry. She dumped the entire bag of sugar into the soup pot, causing the dish to erupt violently. The whole class had to shout an alarm, telling her to stop, as it looked like she had completely lost control. In the end, she created something that was technically edible, though it wasn't perfect and was merely the result of a failed rampage. When everyone tasted the food, they realized the curry was nearly impossible to swallow. Minami felt ashamed and apologized for her carelessness, which was mostly Takamori's fault. No one in the class wanted to try her dish. But then an idea sparked in her mind. What if she gave it to Takamori? That would surely make him think she'd be a terrible housewife. With a troubled expression, Minami brought the curry over to Takamori and told him that if he was hungry, he could give it a try. Takamori looked at her for a moment, then he took off his hat and picked up the spoon. Everyone in the class couldn't believe their eyes as they saw him actually preparing to eat the curry. They thought he must be the bravest person in the world. Takamori took a bite of the curry, and then, to everyone's shock, he exclaimed that it was the best curry he had ever had in his entire life. It was truly unbelievable, but for Takamori, eating a dish cooked by the girl he liked was an absolute blessing. Even though Takamori could feel his body having a negative reaction to the food, his mind kept insisting it was delicious. Minami worried that he might get a stomachache, but Takamori held firm to the belief that this dish was genuinely amazing, leaving her completely astonished. She realized that, if she cooked anything at all, he would definitely eat it, and that was an undeniable fact. Minami started to feel embarrassed and insisted that she would cook a much better meal for him in the future. She knew this dish was a complete failure, but she wasn't always such a bad cook. So she hoped he would stop forcing himself to eat just because she was the one who'd made it. Minami felt guilty for making him eat something so inedible, and she was determined to make a dish he would be sure to love next time. When she said that, Takamori looked surprised, and he wanted to make sure he hadn't misheard her. Minami said she couldn't make anything too complicated, but in reality, she was actually quite a good cook. However, that curry was just truly awful, like it could start a plague. She wanted to make it up to him, because even though she knew the food was inedible, she still insisted on giving it to him. Minami began to worry if Takamori now doubted her cooking abilities, but he suddenly took her hand and said he was really happy that he got to try her cooking. And from now on, he wanted to eat every single meal that she made. Minami felt like she was seeing stars, and she tried to point out that he was holding her hand, and he apologized. Now, she started thinking about what she should cook for him. This led her to imagine that she was cooking for her husband, and her brain practically short-circuited. No way! She couldn't believe Takamori would mean it like that. It was way too soon for her to be cooking for him as if he were her boyfriend. The classmates around them started to get curious about what the two of them were up to, and right in that moment, a new romance began to blossom.